Signing Operation Homefront. The taxi's brakes shrieked, jolting me awake as we stopped just short of the gravel drive I hadn't set eyes on in over a year. I stepped out, boots still caked with Afghan dust, uniform pressed sharp, heart pounding with the hope of catching my mom off guard, of finally sinking into my own bed after 11 months away. But the world I'd left behind was gone. Where my white cottage once stood, green shutters framing the porch swing, there was only a fenced-in riot of barking, a dog park. Two Labradors tore after a tennis ball across the ghost of my living room. A woman in leggings glared as she yanked her spaniel from my duffel bag. For a moment, I thought I'd made a mistake. But then I saw it. The old oak, its trunk still bearing the scar of my initials, carved before I shipped out. The tree stood stubborn in what used to be my yard. Only now my yard was a memory. A sign read, Cedar Grove Community Park, sponsored by the Homeowners Association. Below, a plaque gushed about unity and shared happiness. My pulse hammered, louder than any mortar blast. I flagged down a jogger, asked what happened to the house. He shrugged, said some deadbeat hadn't paid taxes, so the HOA took over. He jogged off, never guessing I was the so-called deadbeat. Something inside me fractured. Not anger, not sorrow, but a hollow disbelief, deep as bone. I'd survived ambushes, led night patrols, pulled children from burning huts. But here, the enemy wore athleisure and carried clipboards. I spent hours ricocheting between city offices, each clerk more lost than the last. The record said I'd lost my land 6 months ago for unpaid taxes, but I'd filed my military exemption before I left. One clerk, barely glancing up, told me to talk to the HOA president, Susan Whitaker. She was apparently a stickler for neighborhood standards. I found her in the community clubhouse, perched like royalty atop a throne of self-awarded plaques. Behind her, a framed photo. Visionary leader. She was scolding a kid for hanging a basketball hoop when I walked in. I cleared my throat, introduced myself as the owner of 214 Pine Lane. Her eyes flicked up, lips curling into a practiced, smug smile. She flipped through a folder, declared my lot delinquent, unclaimed, reassigned to the HOA by protocol. I mentioned my active duty status, the federal exemption. She cut me off. Maybe you should have thought about your responsibilities before running off to play soldier. The room froze, her words hanging like smoke. I cited the law, protections for deployed service members. She offered me a lot by the trash compactor, purring, "We can work something out, honey," like she was tossing scraps to a stray. I left, her smirk burning behind my eyes. That night, I checked into a motel staring at the ceiling. My body was home, but my mind was still at war. This wasn't Afghanistan. It was dirtier. The battlefield was my own street, against neighbors I'd bled to protect. By morning, I called Javier Morales, a buddy from my unit, now in cyber ops. I'd saved his life once. He owed me. Within hours, he unearthed a web of forged deeds, backdated HOA minutes, land deals tied to Susan's brother-in-law. The HOA had faked a paper trail, claimed my land was abandoned. Javier found emails where Susan bragged about flipping that grunt's lot and keeping the neighborhood soldier-free. One message joked, "If he ever comes back, I'll salute and slink off." Rage simmered, not the kind that explodes, but the kind that sharpens. A lawsuit would take years. Susan had lawyers on speed dial. I needed something louder, something that couldn't be ignored. I remembered Colonel Marcus Reed, who once told me to call if I ever needed help stateside. I explained how the HOA stole my home while I was deployed. His voice went cold steel. "Send me the coordinates and a list of their assets. Quiet or loud?" I chose loud. The plan took shape. I didn't want an apology or a check. I wanted the HOA to feel what it was to have their world upended. Javier worked nights, building a dossier thick enough to choke a bureaucrat. Records of forged signatures, illegal expansions, even a clubhouse built on protected wetlands. Susan's emails mocked veterans, called my house a shack. I pinned one to my motel wall, next to a photo of my porch where Mom used to sip iced tea. I wondered if they'd burned it or just dumped it. Either way, they'd stolen more than land. They'd stolen memory. Next, I met Judge Clara Hensley at the courthouse. Former JAG, she knew my unit. despised civilian scams against soldiers. I laid out Javier's evidence, forged documents, zoning violations, emails. She called it a criminal masterpiece, but warned the HOA's money and connections could stall a lawsuit for years. I asked about federal seizure for investigation. Her eyes lit up. If it's tied to public service abuse or security, it's possible. I called Colonel Reed. He proposed a military training exercise on the disputed land, urban conflict readiness. Within a day, he secured approval for Operation Homefront, a weekend-long exercise by the 212th Tactical Battalion. My lot and the surrounding HOA properties would become a simulation zone. Legal, audacious, perfect. Susan had no idea her next meeting would be crashed by Humvees. Javier and I mapped every illicit HOA structure, the dog park, clubhouse, even Susan's prized rose garden. Military logistics, planned vehicle routes, and landing zones. 3 days later, everything was set. I spent my last motel night staring at photos of my house, remembering Mom's laughter as we painted the shutters. That land was my roots. They tried to rip it out. Now I was rewriting the story. At dawn, Willow Ridge woke to the thunder of diesel engines. Humvees rolled past manicured lawns. Soldiers pitched tents in the dog park. A Black Hawk buzzed the meditation garden. Residents gaped in pajamas, clutching mugs. Susan stormed out in a satin robe, her cup reading Cedar Grove's finest. Her jaw dropped as engineers turned her clubhouse into a command post. She charged an officer, waving her mug like a scepter. He handed her a packet, federal orders for land investigation and temporary occupation. Her face flushed crimson as she shrieked about sovereignty. No one listened. I arrived in an unmarked SUV, watched her spot me. "You did this?" she spat, storming over. I nodded. "That land you stole? It's mine again, inch by inch." She sputtered, clinging to HOA rights. I asked when she last checked her property lines. She froze. Soldiers cordoned off the clubhouse, pool, and garden, all built on stolen or unpermitted land. Susan tried to lock herself inside, but the county had keys. Her wine fridge became a cooler for MREs, her living room a map room. Residents panicked, some waving pizza box protest signs, others calling news vans. A few tried to challenge the military, but backed down when shown their own violations. An elderly couple brought me coffee, confessed they'd hated Susan's fines for years. They shared photos of my old house, offered to testify. I thanked them, feeling the tide shift. By noon, the media swarmed. Susan's press conference collapsed as cameras caught military tape around her precious sign. She ranted about government overreach, but cracked when asked why a veteran's home was razed. Her meltdown went viral. Hashtags like Justice Forrest Ramirez and Susan Sinks exploded. Javier traced 5 more fraudulent land deals. Susan's brother-in-law faced IRS probes. A red sign went up. Federal training ground. Restricted access. Susan's empire was occupied. Her petunias trampled by boots. Cedar Grove became a fortress. Soldiers drilled past stunned residents. Drones mapped the land. Susan's kitchen hosted briefings. Checkpoints blocked her allies. Inside the command post, I reviewed documents with a DOD officer, confirming my ownership in the HOA's crimes. They'd bulldozed my house without permits,